If you've been following any South Asian creators, you've probably seen this clip of comedian Zarna Garg and her daughter Zoya's appearance on the Daily Beast podcast with Joanna Coles.
Give you a hot take. I mean, the Indian community loves Trump. It is what it is. The Indian community loves Trump. We don't.
What the Indian community makes of Usha Vance.
Yeah, I mean, I think Usha Vance is very aspirational, especially as a girl that's dating American guys.
And I want to bring my journalist take on it. I'm Maithili Sampath Kumar, and I run the Export Quality newsletter over on Substack, bringing you news about and from South Asian Americans and Canadians. And for the purpose of this video, Indian Americans are those who are US citizens, since we're talking about politics and voting. But culturally and in general, I use that term to mean people who grew up here. Now, I do have my thoughts on the Second Lady, which I wrote about for Teen Vogue last year, and I have an opinion on her, but I want to bring some data into the conversation too. Indian Americans are the largest eligible voter subgroup of Asian American Pacific Islanders. We make up about 21% of eligible AAPI voters. We also have the highest voter turnout among AAPIs, with around 70% of us voting in the last cycle. So what I'm trying to say is that we're small but mighty in the grand scheme of voting. That comes into play later. And while adult Indian Americans make up less than 1% of the US population, we have about 4.5% of senior government positions. Maybe less now that we've had this red wedding that Trump did earlier in the year on the federal government. In that video, Zoya says she holds Usha Vance up as a role model. And we know Zarna and her husband have said on previous podcasts, and there were some Instagram posts on her wildly popular account, that she does too. And also maybe holds Trump in that same light. They did vote for him in past elections. And maybe they've said differently privately, but all the public sees is this commodification of thinly veiled neutrality and support for all Indian Americans. And Ariana Merchant and HDP Travel have really great videos on it, so I'll tag them below. We in the community have all heard anecdotally over the years about these uncles and aunties who voted for Trump or who support him and don't think any of these policies affect them, like ICE hunting down people or affirmative action or DEI efforts. And they're generally pretty wealthy and want to benefit from tax cuts and maybe a little white adjacency. And as someone who didn't grow up wealthy, I might be a little more sensitive to that kind of rhetoric, but I think we all know at least a few parents' friends or newer immigrant cousins who work in Bay Area big tech that are like this. But the data shows something else, some things to keep in mind. We didn't really have large-scale exit polling or data to show how people voted for any Asian Americans until after 2018. When I covered the midterms that year, it was surprising because AAPIs are the fastest growing voting bloc in the country. So it makes sense that we also don't have a ton of disaggregated data about Indian Americans yet, meaning we're usually lumped together under this whole AAPI umbrella. But AAPI Data is a group in California that has been doing an amazing, fascinating job of illustrating who we are as Asian American groups through raw numbers. So if you want to nerd out on them, go check them out. AAPI Data says that over half of us as Indian Americans lean Democrat, about a quarter of us are independent, and about a quarter of us are Republican. But I want to point out to one particular study I found really interesting. The Carnegie Endowment for International Peace did a full survey of Indian Americans in 2024, and it also showed that we do lean Democrat at the voting booth. But according to the survey, we don't love Vivek Ramaswamy or Nikki Haley or Usha Vance as much as Zoya and Zarna seem to. But we're also not the solidly Democratic voting bloc that, say, Black women have been historically for the party either. Technically, we're only about 1.5 generations into voting in the US, so what is fascinating and worrisome, depending on how you feel, is that the study showed we are starting to lean right towards Republicans. It's a little unclear when that trend started, but we can point to maybe 2016 to 2024 as a rough time period estimate. As to why that's happening, if we take other minority groups as a template of sorts, it's likely because of rising incomes and newer waves of not just high-income immigrants becoming citizens and then civically engaged, but that they're coming from, and it's far easier to maintain ties with, an India under Prime Minister Narendra Modi, who has been accused of Hindu supremacy and has maintained this sort of more social conservatism, even though the overall culture of India has. I do a lot of work with hyper-local community media, and the impact of home countries on immigrant voting patterns is still pretty clear. And my take is that it's even stronger for countries like India, where economic development and the ability to stay in touch have changed almost overnight and keep increasing. But this is all to say Zoya and Zarna are not in the majority, even among Indian Americans. However, the more those voices, attitudes, and let's face it, incomes get platformed, that could change. For more news about South Asian Americans and Canadians and more of my other reporting, like and follow me here, and subscribe to Export Quality over on Substack. TikTok won't let me add the link to my bio yet since I don't have 1,000 followers, so please be sure to send this to all your friends.